Okay, so what is going on between the United States and Iran right now? You've got a military standoff, a high-stakes blockade, and some really fragile peace talks all happening at once. It's a situation with massive global consequences. So let's break it down. What's happening, why it matters, and where this whole thing could be headed. And make no mistake, the stakes could not be higher. This quote from US President Donald Trump really frames the conflict in some pretty stark terms. It sets this incredibly aggressive tone, even as the rest of the world is hoping for some kind of diplomatic way out. What we're watching here is a really dangerous balancing act. I mean, on one hand, you have military actions that are escalating practically by the hour. And on the other, there's this fragile, almost desperate attempt to pull everyone back from the brink with peace talks. And this whole crisis really boils down to two key locations. First, you've got the Strait of Hormuz, that's the heart of the military drama, and then you have Islamabad, Pakistan, which is the potential neutral ground for a diplomatic solution. Two cities, two very different potential outcomes. Let's start with what's happening on the water. This is where things have gotten incredibly heated. A direct naval incident has just cranked up the tension, turning what was a tense standoff into a hot conflict right there in the waters of the Gulf of Oman. So here's the specific event that kicked this all off. American forces intercepted and seized an Iranian cargo ship called the Tuska. The U.S. claims the ship was trying to run its naval blockade. And President Trump's description of how it went down was, well, pretty blunt. He said that after a warning was ignored, the U.S. Navy disabled the ship by blowing a hole in the engine room. So we're not talking about a gentle redirect here. This was a forceful military action. Iran's reaction was swift and, honestly, pretty predictable. They didn't just fire off an angry press release, they launched a military response, sending drones right towards the U.S. warships involved in the blockade. It's just a classic, dangerous tit-for-tat escalation. And this really shows you how Iran sees the situation. From their perspective, this isn't a legal blockade. They're calling it armed piracy. They framed the American action as an illegal act of aggression and have publicly promised they will hit back. You know, while these military threats and counter-threats are making headlines, it's so important to remember the real-world impact. Beyond all the hardware and the political posturing, there's a staggering human cost. According to Iranian sources, this conflict has already led to over 3,300 deaths inside Iran. It just grounds this whole thing in a really tragic reality. And while that human cost is just devastatingly concentrated inside Iran, the economic shockwaves, well, those are being felt everywhere. A standoff in one narrow strait can create massive ripple effects across the entire global economy. So why should you care about a naval blockade that's happening thousands of miles away? The answer really is pretty simple. Oil. Because that blockade could drive the price of oil up to $110 a barrel. Now, that's a projection from Citigroup, but that isn't just some abstract number for Wall Street. That's a price that has a direct line to what you pay at the gas pump, and for a ton of other goods too. And Iran is making this connection crystal clear. Their vice president basically warned that if their oil can't get out, then nobody's security in the region is guaranteed. They're directly linking this economic pressure to future instability. It's a threat. The scale of this economic pressure is just staggering. President Trump claims the blockade is costing Iran $500 million every single day. This is the leverage the U.S. is using to try and force Iran to negotiate. But is it working? Well, that brings us to the other side of this story. So, while all of that is happening at sea, there is a major diplomatic effort trying to get off the ground. Pakistan is attempting to broker peace talks, but the path to actually de-escalating this thing is, well, it's anything but smooth. And this slide lays out the fundamental problem perfectly. I mean, on the left, you've got President Trump saying the U.S. delegation is practically on the plane already. But on the right, Iran's position is just as clear. No talks until that blockade is lifted. You can't really have a conversation if one side refuses to even walk into the room. So we're kind of stuck in this diplomatic limbo. The host nation, Pakistan, is putting on a brave face, saying they're confident Iran will show up. But Tehran, total radio silence. They're refusing to confirm if they'll even send anyone. It's a very high-stakes waiting game. And this quote from the Iranian president really gets to the heart of the issue. This isn't just about this one blockade. He's talking about a deep historical mistrust, reminding us that there are decades of bad blood here. That's the real barrier to any kind of lasting peace. So where does all this leave us? The future of this whole crisis now really hinges on a few core issues. a few non-negotiable demands, where neither side seems willing to budge an inch. And here they are, laid out plain and simple. The U.S. says the blockade stays put until a deal is done. Iran says the blockade must end before talks can even begin. And then, on top of that, you have the huge issue of nuclear weapons. The U.S. demands Iran give up its program, while Iran has stated that getting rid of its nuclear stockpile was never an option. These are two sets of completely contradictory demands. It's a total stalemate. Which leaves us with this final, critical question. Is this high-pressure strategy the only way to actually force a deal? Or are these immovable positions just pushing two nations, and maybe the world, right to the brink of a much, much larger conflict? That is the question on which everything now hangs.